Hey, welcome back, everybody. Let me start by saying this. I had a plan for what I was going to talk about this week in this video, and ironically, it was about consistency. In that video, I was going to talk about how to deal with change. So instead, I decided to live that out, and let's hold on off on that topic for this week. I decided to change what I'm going to talk about today. Let's talk about work-life balance, and first of all, why that phrase sucks. Actually, let me take a step back. Let me set this up. My whole Army career, I struggled with this notion of work-life balance and what it really means. Yeah, I heard senior leaders talk about how important it was, though I had one boss freely admit that it's not possible to achieve work-life balance, and I, at the time, found it disheartening until I agreed with him. But most of the senior leaders that I heard talk about this were late in their careers, fully successful, 2, 3, 4-star generals, and my takeaway from hearing them talk about it was that they achieved what they did by not having work-life balance. They were now regretting it, and they were offering to more junior leaders this opportunity to kind of figure it out for themselves. So kind of a mixed message there. But I'll explain again why I agreed with the one boss who said that work-life balance is not possible. I'll explain that in a second. Let me first set it up like this by telling my story. There was a distinct moment in my career when I knew things had to change. I'd been feeling it come to a head for several years before this particular moment. And the feeling was that as my family grew and my requirements at home increased, so did my responsibilities in the Army. So I got to this point where I felt like things were pulling me in opposite directions. And I felt so pulled that I was convinced that I didn't have enough to give either work or my family, and I felt like a failure on all fronts. This happened in particular as a major where multiple deployments back and forth to overseas, lots of responsibilities, lots of work, hadn't quite figured out what my priorities were, and I felt things suffer. I felt my absence at home. I felt the tension that it created at home. I also felt, I just felt tired all the time. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't taking care of my family, and I just knew that something had to change. So this has become, because of that moment, an ongoing passion project for me, and I see leaders still going through it, and hopefully some of this will hit home to you today. But back to the phrase. The phrase itself is misleading and creates an expectation. Just think about it. Work-life balance, right? What lets you know things are in balance? Well, a scale. The phrase implies that you have equal parts of both, and that is in such a dynamic environment of leadership and a family life, or even if you're single and just leisure or doing things for yourself, it's in fact impossible to keep those things in balance all the time. So it's an impossible expectation. So when I talked about that boss before, that's where I agree with him. And how do you measure that? Right? Is it time? Is it effort? Is it investment? I mean, that's the trap that I originally fell into. It was only when I started to think about this in a different way that things started to make sense. It's not balance, it's something else. And for years I struggled for the right words on how to describe this. But today I was listening to Ken Coleman's podcast and he had Arthur Brooks on as a guest. I won't waste your time explaining who those guys are. You can look them up. They're both out there, right? So it won't take you long to figure out who they were. But my point is that Brooks was talking about just this problem, but he called it work-life integration. I like that. I'll take it one step further. I think it's integration and prioritization. It really isn't about trying to balance how much time or effort you spend at work or at home. It's about setting priorities for yourself that are aligned with your values and your goals and making decisions about what is the most important thing at any given time. We had a chart that I borrowed from who was then the chief of staff of the Army at the time, General McConville. And on one side of this chart, he had war, and on the other side of this chart, he had peace. And there were two axes along that spectrum. One was personal or home, or there was some way to describe the life part of this, and then there was the military part. And the point of that chart was to show what activities kind of what did balance look like. It was his effort to try to describe what that looked like. So if you're at war, obviously the majority of your time and investment are going to be on your career and on preparing for that very intense activity. So the windows for family or life side of things are small. On the other end of that spectrum is peace, or you're not training or whatever else. I mean, the application of that would apply in a lot of different scenarios, but obviously the window for what you can do as part of your life side of this equation were a lot bigger, and the requirements that would be prioritized for work were a lot smaller. And I really like that because it gave us something to kind of talk from to describe this thing. But for me, the end result of that thought process was the prioritization of your time. And these priorities are figuratively, and in the case of coaches, literally seasonal. We have to know when the time periods are when certain activities get more of our attention. So if we expect that we're going to be at work for 12 hours and home for 12 hours, well, one, that's dumb because then you have to sleep, and that's got to be factored in the equation. It's a whole mess trying to do this as a matter of time. But let's say, for example, you're a coach. You just finished your season. You've made your off-season transition. You can find a window, and should, to spend more time in leisure, either doing things that you want to do individually or with your family if you're in a family. On the converse, if you make those investments, when it comes time to start fall camp or spring training or whatever it is, your family will understand that that is one of those time periods when your duties as a coach have to take the priority. So investing in those different things at different times and different seasons of your year will help you to maintain this. Failing to do that, and I'm hearing it kind of through the screen from the coaches. Well, we don't have an off season anymore. Blah blah blah. Well, I'll orient you back to what I said about how does this align with your values and your goals? Have you thought about these values and goals from a holistic perspective? And if all of your values and all of your goals are oriented on being a great coach, well, that's where you're going to make those decisions. If those are integrated with your personal life, family values and goals, well, now you've got something to work from. And that's really my whole thought on integration. And that's the biggest takeaway for me on this whole subject. For me, I made the most progress towards understanding how to do this when I realized that I was at my best when I was the same person everywhere. In the office, on a deployment, at home, in training, wherever I was, I had to rest on what my purpose was and what my values were. And when I did that, I learned that I was just better everywhere. The better I was at being a dad and a husband, the better Army leader I was. And the reverse to that was also true. Or the converse to that was also true. The better Army leader I was, the better dad and husband I was. So when we as leaders take a more holistic view of who we are and what's important to us, and approach our priorities in that same way, and let those priorities drive our decisions about where we're making our investments, we make smarter decisions in how we spend our time and our energy. Look, this is not easy. Trust. I get that completely, and I still mess it up, right? It takes a lot of thought and a lot of effort, but I guarantee you that it will be worth it. This whole process will be worth it when you think about it, and you will be better equipped to be the best leader you can in all of those different environments if you take a step back and you make a holistic evaluation of what your priorities are, what your values are, and then you can make your decisions about how and when you spend your time from there. I hope this was helpful. I think thinking about it this way helps people avoid the grind of always, focusing on one or the other, and takes away some of the guilt of not spending time in one versus the other. It does take some courage, though. It will take some courage for you to make decisions based on these values, and it'll feel like professional risk in some situations. my question back to you is, so what, right? If these are your values and you see this as your purpose in life, to integrate your life in a way that isn't just about your career, then I think what you'll find is everything will pay off better. You aren't really sacrificing one over the other. You're just going to make everything better. I appreciate you stopping by, and as always, culture wins.